Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're exploring a question many couples face but rarely discuss openly. Why do some women feel distant from their husbands as they get older? If you've ever noticed a shift in your relationship over time, where the closeness you once shared seems to fade and minor frustrations turn into deep resentment, you're not alone. This isn't about sudden change or falling out of love overnight. Instead, it often results from years of emotional labor, unspoken expectations, and evolving priorities. Many women, after decades of marriage, begin to realize that their needs and desires have been pushed aside for too long. But here's the good news. This doesn't have to be the fate of every long-term relationship. Understanding the practical reasons behind this emotional shift can help couples reconnect and rebuild a stronger bond. In this video, we'll break down the key factors that lead to emotional distance and, most importantly, what can be done to prevent or reverse it. So, stick with me until the end. You won't want to miss this. Let's dive in. 1. The heavy burden of emotional labor. Many men fail to recognize the immense burden of emotional labor that women carry in relationships. While a man may provide financial support or contribute practically, women often are responsible for maintaining a relationship's emotional and social structure. This goes beyond managing household tasks. It includes remembering birthdays, planning vacations, keeping up with family obligations, and ensuring emotional harmony. These efforts are often invisible, yet critical to a relationship's survival. At first, a woman may take on this role willingly, believing it's simply part of love and partnership. However, as these efforts go unrecognized over time, she feels exhausted and unappreciated. It's not that she minds putting in the effort, it's that she grows tired of doing it alone. When she constantly initiates deep conversations, resolves conflicts, and bridges emotional gaps, resentment builds. She may not express it outright, but slowly she starts to disengage. She laughs less, shares less, and eventually stops trying altogether. Men often realize too late that the woman they love has withdrawn, not because she stopped caring, but because she was left to carry the weight of the relationship on her own. The problem is not that she lost interest. She ran out of energy to keep things going. A woman who feels emotionally drained will pull away not as an act of defiance, but as an act of self-preservation. A man who understands the importance of emotional labor and actively participates in it stands out. He listens, engages, and takes responsibility for the relationship's emotional well-being. He does not leave all the planning, nurturing, and emotional work to her alone. Instead, he makes her feel valued through grand gestures and everyday actions that show he is equally invested. In the end, love does not fade because two people stop caring. It fades because one person carries the weight while the other assumes it will always be carried. The men who build lasting connections are the ones who recognize this dynamic and take action before it's too late. 2. The decline of meaningful communication. In the early stages of a relationship, conversations flow effortlessly. Couples stay up late discussing dreams, fears, and the future they hope to build together. Every word carries weight. Every exchange strengthens their emotional bond. However, as time passes, these deep conversations become less frequent. What once felt like a vibrant, engaging dialogue transforms into routine exchanges about schedules, groceries, and daily responsibilities. For a woman, emotional intimacy is as vital as physical connection. She does not just want a man's presence. She craves engagement. When she shares her thoughts, she's not always looking for a solution. Sometimes she simply wants to be heard. But many men, assuming that silence means contentment, grow comfortable without real conversation. They believe everything must be fine as long as there are no conflicts. They fail to see that silence is often the first sign of emotional distance. A woman who no longer feels heard eventually stops trying to be understood. She begins to withdraw, not in anger, but in quiet resignation. The absence of meaningful communication makes her feel invisible, as though her thoughts and feelings no longer matter. She may not express her frustration openly, but inside she begins to detach. What was once a relationship filled with curiosity and emotional depth slowly becomes one of polite exchanges and surface-level interaction. The men who maintain firm, lasting relationships understand that communication is not something to be abandoned over time, but to be nurtured. They remain curious, engaged, and invested in their partner's inner world. They ask questions not just out of obligation, but out of genuine interest. They listen not just to respond, but to understand. The decline of meaningful conversation and emotional distance does not happen overnight. But when a woman feels like she is speaking into a void, she will begin to pull away. And once she is gone, emotionally or physically, it is often too late to bring her back. 3. The never-ending burden of housework. Women have taken on most household responsibilities for generations, not just in physical labor, but also in the mental and emotional weight of running a home. While many men assume that managing daily chores, organizing schedules, and maintaining family harmony is simply part of their wives' role, the reality is that this unacknowledged burden leads to deep frustration and exhaustion. Over time, what starts as routine caregiving transforms into a relentless cycle that drains women emotionally. Even in retirement, when many women expect a break from years of service, they often find themselves still doing most of the work while their husbands enjoy leisure. This imbalance isn't just about fairness in household chores. It's about the psychological toll of feeling unappreciated. A woman who constantly carries the weight of responsibility without acknowledgement or support may eventually withdraw emotionally, leading to resentment that erodes the foundation. However, when a man actively shares in these responsibilities, whether by taking the initiative in household tasks, expressing gratitude, or recognizing the emotional effort behind the work, it creates a sense of partnership rather than servitude. Small actions, such as cooking a meal, planning an outing, or simply acknowledging her efforts, can shift the dynamic from silent resentment to mutual appreciation. A strong relationship isn't just about love. It's about the daily choices that show a woman she is valued, not just expected to serve. 4. Personal growth versus stagnation. A relationship thrives when both individuals continue to grow, evolve, and bring new energy into their shared experiences. Women by nature are drawn to expansion, whether through learning, traveling, or exploring new interests. They seek intellectual stimulation and emotional depth, constantly searching for ways to enrich their lives. However, an unspoken disconnect forms when a man remains stagnant, clinging to routine and resisting change. In the early stages, this disconnect is subtle. She may desire to try new things, engage in deeper conversations, or step outside her comfort zone, only to be indifferent or resistant. At first, she rationalizes it, convincing herself that stability has merits. But over time, as she continues to evolve and he remains the same, the emotional distance widens. She no longer feels intellectually or emotionally stimulated, and a quiet restlessness takes root. This is where many men make a crucial mistake. They assume love alone is enough to sustain a relationship, but love, without growth, becomes stagnant. A woman who feels unchallenged and uninspired will begin seeking stimulation elsewhere. not necessarily in the form of another man, but through experiences that fill the void her partner no longer does. She might dive into new friendships, pursue solo adventures, or immerse herself in activities that make her feel alive again. And the more she finds fulfillment outside the relationship, the less she needs to invest in it. A man who understands this dynamic does not fear change, he embraces it. He continuously improves himself, not to keep her interested, but because personal growth is essential to his fulfillment. He remains curious, engaged, and open to new experiences, ensuring that he and his partner continue to evolve together rather than drift apart. Ultimately, it is not grand romantic gestures that keep a woman invested. It is the ability to grow alongside her, making the journey as enriching as the destination. 5. The loss of physical and emotional intimacy. Many men assume that maintaining physical and emotional intimacy is no longer necessary once a relationship is established. Early in the relationship, affection flows naturally. There are lingering touches, spontaneous compliments, and deep conversations late into the night. But over time, routine settles in, responsibilities take priority, and expressions of love become less frequent. A man may still love his partner deeply, but without realizing it, he stops showing it in ways that matter to her. For women, intimacy is more than physical closeness. It is about feeling desired, cherished, and emotionally connected. When a man stops making her feel special, when he no longer holds her gaze with admiration, reaches for her hand just because he no longer listens with curiosity, she begins to feel invisible. She may not voice it immediately. At first, she makes excuses, convincing herself he is busy, tired, or stressed. But as the pattern continues, something shifts within her. She starts to detach. The relationship is still intact, but the emotional core begins to weaken. Conversations become more practical than personal. Laughter becomes less frequent. The warmth that once defined their connection starts to cool. If left unaddressed, she stops seeking his affection and, worse, stops responding to his. The marriage turns into companionship rather than partnership, coexistence rather than connection. The tragedy is that many men only realize this when the damage is already done. They think she has lost interest or has changed, but in reality she simply stopped fighting for something that no longer felt mutual. The good news is that intimacy is not lost overnight, and it can be rekindled. A man who understands this dynamic does not take his partner's love for granted. He continues to make her feel wanted, not out of obligation, but because he knows that keeping the fire alive is not about grand gestures. It's about never letting her forget that she still matters. 6. Retirement can strain the marriage. Retirement is often imagined as a time of peace, a long-awaited reward after decades of hard work. Couples envision leisurely mornings, shared vacations, and the freedom to finally enjoy each other's company without the stress of careers and responsibilities. However, for many women, retirement does not bring the relief they expected. Instead of newfound freedom, they find themselves carrying an unexpected burden, the weight of their husband's sudden dependency. For years, a man's daily structure revolved around his work, providing him with a sense of purpose, routine, and social interaction. When that structure disappears, he often turns to his wife as his primary source of entertainment, companionship, and emotional support. At first, she welcomes the extra time together, believing it will strengthen their bond. But as the days go on, she begins to feel suffocated. Her time is no longer hers alone. Every activity, every errand, every quiet moment is now shared. The independence she had once envisioned, the ability to explore her interests, cultivate new friendships, and embrace personal freedom, begins to slip away. She may not express her frustration outright, but resentment builds in silence. She finds herself longing for space, for a sense of self, apart from the constant presence of her husband. What was meant to be a time of relaxation starts to feel like another phase of caretaking. The dynamic has shifted, not in a way that brings joy, but in a way that makes her feel trapped in a new role she never signed up for. A wise man recognizes this shift before it becomes a wedge between them. He understands that his wife does not exist solely to fill the void that retirement has left in his life. He maintains his interests, cultivates friendships, and builds a routine that gives him fulfillment outside of their marriage. In doing so, he also gives his wife space to enjoy her journey. Retirement does not have to strain a marriage. However, to bring true happiness, both partners must embrace this new chapter with a sense of individuality, rather than placing the burden of fulfillment on each other. The most substantial relationships are those where both people continue to grow, not just together, but also as individuals. 7. Feeling unheard and unappreciated. In many long-term relationships, the real source of pain isn't loud arguments or heated fights. It's the quiet erosion of emotional connection. A woman who once felt seen and valued slowly begins to feel invisible. At first, she expresses her thoughts, shares her concerns, and seeks emotional intimacy. But over time, as her words go unheard and her efforts unacknowledged, she starts to withdraw. Men often don't notice this shift until it's too late. They assume their wives or partners will always be there, understanding and willing to make the effort. The problem isn't neglect in a physical sense, it's the slow decline of emotional presence. She may still be there, managing the household, handling responsibilities and going through the motions, but emotionally, she's already distancing herself. She no longer expects to be heard, so she stops trying. She no longer expects appreciation, so she stops seeking it. This quiet detachment doesn't happen overnight. It builds over years of feeling like her thoughts, feelings, and needs are secondary. She may not even say it out loud. She simply stops engaging in the relationship as she once did. Her laughter fades, her conversations become shorter, and she no longer initiates the moments of closeness that once brought warmth to the relationship. A man who understands this dynamic doesn't wait until she's emotionally gone to start listening. He recognizes that showing appreciation isn't about grand gestures, but the small, consistent efforts that remind her she is valued. It's about being present in conversations, acknowledging her feelings, and ensuring she knows that her presence in his life is not taken for granted. In the end, relationships rarely fall apart because of one dramatic event. They unravel because of the slow, unnoticed moments when one person stops feeling like they matter. The men who build lasting love are the ones who notice these moments before they become permanent. 8. The realization that life is short. There comes a moment in a woman's life when she sees time differently. What once felt endless now seems fragile, slipping through her fingers faster than ever imagined. The loss of a loved one might trigger the sudden realization of aging, or even a quiet moment of reflection that forces her to acknowledge that the years ahead are far fewer than the years behind. When this moment comes, her perspective shifts in ways that can completely transform her relationship with the man in her life. For years, she may have tolerated unspoken disappointments, accepted routine interactions, and settled for a relationship that felt comfortable rather than deeply fulfilling. She may have convinced herself that love is about endurance, about making things work no matter how distant she felt inside. But when she truly grasps how fleeting life is, something changes. She begins to ask herself difficult questions that she may have ignored for far too long. Am I happy? Do I feel truly loved? Is this the life I want to live for the rest of my days? If the answers to these questions fill her with unease rather than comfort, she starts to withdraw. This withdrawal is not dramatic nor filled with loud arguments or desperate pleas for attention. It is quiet, almost imperceptible at first. She stops initiating conversations as often. She no longer fights over the small things because deep down she realizes they no longer matter. She no longer seeks the affection or approval she once craved, not because she has stopped caring, but because she is beginning to accept the truth. She deserves more than mere existence in a relationship that does not nourish her soul. Many men fail to recognize this shift for what it truly is. They assume she has simply become cold, distant, or lost interest. They misinterpret her silence as indifference when in reality it is clarity. She does not want to be in a relationship where she feels unseen. She no longer has the energy to convince someone to love her the way she needs to be loved. And so, rather than fight for scraps of affection, she does the one thing she never imagined she would do. She lets go. Some women walk away physically. They pack their bags, leave the home they built, and choose to start anew, believing that life is too short to spend in an unfulfilling relationship. Others remain physically present, but emotionally absent, pouring their energy into anything that makes them feel alive again. Friendships, careers, and passions they once put aside. The man she once prioritized is now a background figure in the life she reclaimed for herself. The men who truly understand women know this process does not happen overnight. It is not a single moment of realization, but a series of minor disappointments that, over time, accumulate into something irreversible. And yet, most men only realize what is happening when it is too late, when she has already detached, and her heart has already moved on. But the wise man does not wait for this moment to come. He does not take her for granted, assuming she will always be there simply because she has always been. Instead, he remains engaged. He listens to her words and the emotions she expresses between them. He reminds her that she is cherished, valued, and seen through actions and words. He understands that love is not about complacency, but about continuous effort, about making sure she never has to question her importance in his life. Because in the end, a woman does not leave because she stops loving. She leaves because she finally understands that love should never feel like settling. And once she realizes life is too short to waste, there is no turning back. Love doesn't simply disappear at its core, it fades when neglected. Over the years, minor frustrations, unmet needs, and unspoken disappointments accumulate, creating emotional distance. However, this does not mean that long-term relationships are doomed. With awareness, effort, and mutual commitment, love can be rekindled, even after decades together. For husbands, recognizing their wife's unseen emotional and mental labor, engaging in meaningful conversations, sharing responsibilities, and showing appreciation in everyday actions. Love isn't about grand gestures, but consistent, intentional effort. For wives, expressing their needs openly, prioritizing their fulfillment, and addressing emotional disconnection early can help prevent resentment from taking root. Marriage is not a one-time commitment, but a daily choice. A strong relationship requires both partners to continuously invest in each other, listen, grow continuously, and appreciate the bond they've built. If you want a fulfilling, lasting partnership, don't let routine replace romance. Choose each other every single day. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you noticed these shifts in long-term relationships? What strategies have helped you maintain connection and appreciation in marriage? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more discussions on relationships, emotional connection, and personal growth. See you in the next one.